Hi, I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. So with recent leaks suggesting that Boba Fett might return in the next season of The Mandalorian, I figured now was a good time to talk about the last place we saw Boba Fett. And that is careening into the mouth of a Sarlacc on Tatooine. That's right, last time we saw him he was being eaten alive by a Sarlacc. Which begs the question, could he have survived his encounter with the Sarlacc to appear in The Mandalorian Season 2? But real quick, before we get into that, if you enjoy what you see here today, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button. I upload twice a week, covering everything from Star Wars to Fallout. So before we get into the topic of the Sarlacc in particular, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. And that is that Boba Fett did survive his encounter with the Sarlacc in Legends. But a lot of weird little things have changed in between canon and Legends, so the question remains, would he survive that encounter in canon? To understand that, we have to understand how a Sarlacc works. So in Star Wars, it's not entirely clear whether the Sarlacc is a plant or an animal. It turns out that Sarlaccs can actually move, but they spend most of their lives rooted in one position. Hence the Sarlacc that we see sort of buried in the ground in Return of the Jedi. As one would expect, they feed off of animals that fall into their open mouth. This particular Sarlacc is used as an execution method by Jabba the Hutt. However, it eats like any other Sarlacc. People are thrown into its mouth, it consumes them, and digests them. Now, the digestion process in a Sarlacc is very different from digestion processes in real life here. Once something is consumed by the Sarlacc, it's injected with neurotoxins which prevent it from escaping. It's also fed by the Sarlacc. The Sarlacc pumps nutrients and sort of the necessities of life into its victims, keeping them alive while it digests them. And that digestion process takes a ludicrously long amount of time, roughly 1,000 years. Which, also, extra little tidbit here, Sarlaccs live for tens of thousands of years, maybe even longer. So once the victim is paralyzed by neurotoxins and trapped in the stomach, they have no choice but to sit there and endure the slow and painful process of being digested alive. But generally, the anatomy of the Sarlacc does a lot to stop people from escaping. The mouth of the Sarlacc has got rows and rows of very sharp teeth pointed inward, designed to keep people from climbing out of its mouth. On top of that, there are several sand traps along the length of its esophagus that would make it very hard to climb back out the way you came in. So if the Sarlacc is a good enough death sentence that Jabba the Hutt would use it as an execution tool, how would someone survive an encounter, survive being eaten by this thing? Well, in Legends, it's thanks to Boba's armor. Because Boba Fett is wearing thicker armor than most of the people swallowed by the Sarlacc, he is unable to be poisoned by the neurotoxins. Without the neurotoxins, he is able to fight his way out, eventually killing and escaping the Sarlacc. Now, we don't know nearly as much about Sarlaccs in canon as we do in Legends, but we know some of the basics. We know that they still use the neurotoxins, that it still is injected through a whole bunch of really tiny little tentacles with needle-like spires on the end of them. These tentacles, by the way, are inside the stomach. These aren't the tentacles we see around the mouth. And then we know that the digestion process still takes a millennia. The real question is, could Boba Fett's armor actually prevent the injection of the neurotoxins? Well, assuming that it can, wouldn't that raise some questions with other people who had fallen in? Yes, Boba is wearing Mandalorian armor with thick armor plating, but there are gaps in that armor. I presume that in between the plates of Mandalorian Beskar is a simple fabric, which would be no different than what anyone else that falls into the pit would be wearing. If the fabric was enough to prevent the needles from making it through, you would think that many more people would have survived the Sarlacc. That being said, it's also possible that he simply got lucky, and none of the needles attempted to penetrate anywhere that there wasn't already plate armor. Knowing what we know about the Sarlacc in canon, I would say it's still plausible that Boba Fett could have survived his encounter with the beast. But that's just what I think. I want you to tell me down in the comments what you think about Boba Fett surviving. What do you think about him returning in Season 2 of The Mandalorian? Do you like the idea, or are you still kind of iffy on this whole bringing characters back to life idea that's been kind of prevalent in Star Wars lately? And if you enjoyed what you saw here today, or you just want more sci-fi discussions, why don't you head down below at the subscribe button and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.